My video for August 15th, 2017 is entitled "The World's Leading Terrorist Nation." We've all heard the talk about terrorism being such a huge problem all over the world. How many Americans stop to actually think about this? I suspect most, if all they do is follow cabal-controlled mainstream media news, or mainstream news rather, believe that the terrorist problem is mostly about Islam or maybe North Korea. Some may even buy into the propaganda that communism is somehow terrorist in nature. Yet I want to ask you a question. How many nations put military bases on foreign soil? Perhaps there are others, but I can only think of one nation on earth that plants military bases in foreign nations all over the planet. Of course, that is the USA, Inc. You're right. That's not a nation, although most do not know that it is a corporation. And it is the military arm of the international corporation known among other titles as the New World Order. It's actually international terrorism, with the US blatantly interfering in the affairs of other nations around the world. Does that not make the US the leading terrorist nation on earth? I think it does. You know, people criticized me for pointing out fake Jewish, which is what Zionism is to me. It's fake Judaism. It's not a religion. But really it comes down to the United States being the terrorist nation of the earth. Not even Israel. Israel is terroristic in its own borders, so to speak, and it wants to expand its borders, of course, beyond what was allowed in 1948 when it was established as an independent nation. Was that when it was established? I thought it was actually after the Second World War, and I'm saying 1948 now. Well, like 1948, yeah, that's after the Second World War. Anyway, I looked at a map. I did a little bit of research, and I have the global reach of the U.S. military, and it's interesting. The U.S. military has bases established on all continents, including Antarctica, believe it or not, and everywhere on Earth there is a United States military presence. Now, bear in mind that the United States was sort of tricked into the World War I and World War II. We did not enter it voluntarily. We had to be tricked by the Rothschilds, the international bankers, to come in and enter the war, because the United States, for example, the people of the United States were behind Germany initially, because there's so many Germans that have become American citizens, people of German ancestry that became American citizens, and many of these German Americans actually sided with Hitler during the Second World War. This is historical fact, although it's been covered up by the mainstream media in Western countries, especially in the United States, so that most people are either uneducated or uninformed about the truth. I mean, we believed the propaganda all of our lives, that we've got to protect the world against terrorism, we being the United States. And yet we are the ones that blatantly, on a worldwide scale, interfere in other countries. We overthrew Gaddafi. We overthrew the Venezuelan country and turned it into a worldwide movement of communistic dictatorship, because we are the ones that plant terrorists and make them the heads of nations. It's happened in Zimbabwe, and it's happened all over the world. I'm not even going to try to name all the countries that it's happened in, but China doesn't have military bases all over the world. Russia doesn't have military bases all over the world. The United Kingdom, Great Britain, whatever you want to call it, they do have some military bases in other parts of the world. But the United States is predominantly the military arm of the New World Order. It is the one that, by force, creates puppet nations, puppet leadership all over the world to create the control grid, if you will, forcing suppression of freedom all over the world. We are supposed to be known as a nation of free people. And yet, we are probably the most mentally enslaved people on the planet, which is why we don't even see the reality that we are the terrorists. And this mostly happened, I believe, after the Second World War. They had to trick us to get us even to go into the war. We weren't in the war initially, and Germany would have won. And folks, whether you want to believe it or not, that would have been a very good thing if Germany had won. But no, that wasn't the Rothschilds' plan. That wasn't the plan of the cabal or the international bankers or whatever you want to call them. And when I say, they get mad at me when I say fake Jews, but the Rothschilds are not a spiritual family, folks. They could care less about religion or spirituality or loving one another or about truth. They are a lying family, and the United States has been taken over by Rothschild-influenced corporations. And again, the United States itself is a corporation. It's not a nation, hasn't been a nation actually since it incorporated in the latter part, the last quarter of the 19th century. And it really was trying to incorporate the United States from its foundation, because it did not go along with the idea of freedom for the people. It wanted to enslave the people, so it had to put slavery, they had to frame slavery in a different manner so that the slaves wouldn't understand that they are enslaved. But yet making us, human beings, corporations, was a method of enslaving us without our consent and without full knowledge, which means any contract formed by this is null and void, because contracts can only exist among equal partners with full disclosure. Any contract that does not allow full disclosure is an invalid contract according to law, according to actual law. That's what contracts mean, that it's an agreement between two or more parties on a voluntary basis, not by fraud and not by any measure of coercion. The United States uses coercion and force all over the world to force the will of this New World Order cabal on the rest of the world. But again, the problem is not China or Russia, which are considered communist nations. The problem is actually made in the USA. And this is something that we need to wake up to and become aware of. Think about it, do the research. Thank you for listening, and namaste.